Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for your presence today. Today we have Abiodun Odunga, co-founder of Friends of Nigeria, and some representative of the Nigerian Embassy in France. They are here to present outstanding business opportunities in Nigeria and to engage with Nigerian counterparts. What we are looking is to make deals, business turn into deals, and to foster partnership. Just some information, Nigeria is the largest economy in Africa in terms of GDP. It is also the largest populated continent, the largest populated country on the continent. Without further ado, the topic today is how to do business in Nigeria, and please give a round of applause to Abiodun Odunga for today.
Thank you very much, Ramsey. I'm not here alone. I'm here with my colleagues from Friends of Nigeria. I have Crystal Ifedolapo here. I have Nkechi, also my colleague, and I have Oyindamola, also part of Friends of Nigeria. And of course, there are many companies who traveled all the way from Nigeria to be part of this event. They are also amongst you, and I'm sure after the sessions, you count it worthwhile to be able to engage them, coming from different aspects of the economy, from creative industry, agriculture, fintech, the best of the best. We have them amongst you. So please, once we're done, aside to me, you'll be happy to engage them because they could help you penetrate the market. So again, thank you, Ramsey, and thanks to Bpifrance for this opportunity. How to do business in Nigeria. So maybe as a first opening thought, I would be very sincere to say Nigeria is a very, very complex place to do business in. It's big, the opportunities are true, the potential is massive, but it's not easy. And please mark my words, it's not easy doesn't mean it's not doable. It's not easy, but it's doable. Because of course we already have French startups and other European startups, SMEs doing business there for the past decades or few years. And when we talk about Nigerians' complexity, one of the things you first have to understand is that Nigeria is made up of it's like many countries in one. We have over 250 ethnic groups. Languages, over 500 native languages. So you can imagine having those kind of dynamics in a single country. But of course, we have English as the lingua franca. So that sort of gives you a context, and that's why the same question when people post to say, I want to do business in Africa, right-thinking people will ask you, what part of Africa? Because you don't say Africa. Africa is quite complex. If you're in Morocco, you don't assume that's what is being done in Abidjan. If you're in Abidjan, you don't assume that's what is being done in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. And so that also trickles down to Nigeria. What happens in Lagos exactly is not what happens somewhere else far across the northeast. So Nigeria is quite complex, and you must understand the complexity before you even begin to engage. And to solve that complexity, in terms of working with the local stakeholders, one of the most important things to also put in mind is that you now venture into what everybody knows as, doing your due diligence, feasibility studies. And I say that with every sense of the word. Most people assume there are many reports by, formidable or credible organizations, the World Bank, the IMF, PwC, and all of these groups who have done a terrific job in giving out, surveys and documents around different sectors of the economy. But aside those, I see those as complementary. If you really want to get things done, you have to do your own primary research. And when I say primary research, you need to get local people to do one for you. I had an experience with one of the companies, a French company that we consulted for in the energy sector. It's a no-brainer that we already knew that Nigeria was going to be tilting towards renewable energy. So this company had funding from different stakeholders to the tune of 5 million euros. But the first thing we did was to ask them, in as much as there's an assumption that the market is there in Nigeria, would you just, lay low and let us even engage and get a first-hand report? So we did a research, we traveled back to Nigeria, engaged regulatory bodies. When we back to Paris and we submitted the document to the CEO, of course, I already knew the answer from Nigeria. The document showed that their business is dead on arrival, even though there was an assumption that there was market there. And so rather than waste 100,000 euros, I mean, it was good that they wasted, not waste, they invested 10,000 euros to know the actual truth of what the landscape holds. So regardless of what you have around creative industry, the tech ecosystem, they're all true in some regard, but you need to be able to understand that it's not as it appears on the website. Sometimes you see people make nice websites, nice pitch decks, nice infographics, but you get down and it's far from reality. So that's the second thing to say. As a personal business person, a CEO of a company, you need to understand that you have to do your own diligence, not just relying on what you've seen from credible sources. The third thing, which is related to due diligence, is also to take the bet and travel to Nigeria. And that's why in our organization, we do lots of trade missions. So trade missions where we galvanize different European companies and ask them, what are you interested in? And once we have those kind of offers and interest, we put them all into one basket and we try to get local players at different levels, private sector, state level, federal government, who should interface with them to help them be able to understand what the market really is in terms of taxes, in terms of licenses. And that's, for me, it's important. Regardless of what people tell you about Nigeria, don't travel to Nigeria. It's not as safe. Maybe I'm going to ask some of my colleagues to share experience about that. But Nigeria is full of opportunity, but you don't know what it is until you go yourself and see the dynamism of the young people, see what entrepreneurship looks like. It's all good on the news, it's good on paper, but I ask people to say if you can spend just a fraction of investment. And don't worry about, when it comes to security issues, because that's a conversation for another day, but it's not as... I live in France. I've been in France for about 10 years. And so even when we make France, we know what it is when it comes to PR, and we sell France. I know neighborhoods in France where I can't walk when it's 11 p.m. So Nigeria is not as unsafe as the media makes it look like. The country is quite open. The country is quite interesting. So if you are interested in doing business, like the theme is how to do business, don't also just take a proposal at the face level. And don't just sit behind your desk and accept everything that's been put to you by good consultants. You need to leverage on credible organizations, credible associations. The same way we have the Chambre de Commerce de France, we have the likes of Bpifrance. They are tested and trusted commercial networks, industries, networks who can help you have a soft landing. And the best way to have a soft landing is at the very least take a bet to be able to travel and understand the terrain for yourself. One visit to the country or the region where you plan to set up your business, your factory, or meet local partners, just one visit is worth more than thousands of pages of proposals from the World Bank. So that's spot on for you. And to also add to that is to understand the landscape when it comes to policies. When I said Nigeria is quite complicated, and that it's true because policies and businesses are very intertwined. So most times policies follow after individuals who call the shots. So if you want to do business in Nigeria and you're thinking of something that already is dead on arrival, and when I mean about that, you don't know what the policy is saying, you have no clue around what the government is trying to do. I'll give you a case example. If you had been investing in renewable energy, like many French companies that I know, many of the renewable energy products have been struggling back in Nigeria. Currently, we have a new regulation, with the NESI, that's the electricity supply, bill. There's an amendment in the Constitution that allows states now to be able to invest and curate their own energy plan. So the power sector has been decentralized. So if you're listening to me right now and you're thinking of renewable energy in the country, now is the best time compared to 1 year ago, because that's the gesture and the body language of the government. As I speak to you right now, we have offers from different state governments who are thinking how to convert the everyday buses normal logistic transportation vehicles to be from diesel engine to engines that run on electricity or solar. So if you're in that space, this is the best time because you're not walking against the tide. There is a policy that already supports that. And nobody has any other alternative. Oil and gas is our biggest revenue produce. But as we speak right now, it has a shelf lifespan because countries that we are selling to, the big guys, China, India, all already have plans for 2050 to say we are cutting emissions. Europe is already cutting down their own number of years to be able to bring down when they'll become fully green. So we know as a country that oil and gas is already, it doesn't have a future. So most states in Nigeria right now are beginning to look for investors and companies who can help them match up to the demand of consumption for renewable energy. So again, this is because there is a policy that supports that vehicle and that initiative. And so you don't want to do something, you don't want to start any venture. You first want to ask yourself, what is the body language of the current president? So today we have a new president, and of course he has various priority areas. Number one, security. So if you're here and you're thinking, we're into security, we're into identity, then of course the government has a backing for that because that's a major priority focus. Agriculture is one. France is big in Nigeria on agriculture. So from livestock to feed production to fisheries to agroforestry, there's a lot already happening, and there is still more that can happen because we've not been able to scratch the potential of what we have in the country. So if you're thinking of exportation potential, now today, the current administration is not thinking of just exporting raw produce anymore. The body language is we want companies who can help process our products. We want finished products. We want to add value to what we produce. So if you also have been in the pipeline or companies who are interested in trying to import products, that's fine. You make some amount of revenues, but the long-term plan for companies interested in taking a huge pie of the revenue or potential in the market are those who are thinking of also adding value addition in the agro industry. And I could go on and on, from agro industry to tech to construction. There's a lot happening in those spaces. So again, just as a reminder, leverage on networks, government agencies, and of course, the reason why we're talking about agriculture and all these other sectors is also because there is a diversification agenda in the mind of the government. So when President Macron was in Nigeria, I think in 2018, we're part of that conversation. And even the French president was speaking and was saying that President Macron was saying he would like to concentrate in non-traditional sectors, right? So beyond oil and gas and construction, there are new emerging sectors. And one of such sectors right now in Nigeria is the creative industry. And for those of you who know the stats, the film industry in Nigeria is top 3 in the world. Bollywood, India, Hollywood, the US, Nollywood, Nigeria. Some of us already know Burna Boy, Wizkid, but that's just even a minute part of what the industry really captures. There are other booming, growing industries within that creative industry, and one of them is the gaming industry, animation, fashion, luxury. And so all of these under the the creative industry is quite growing strong. And so if there are ideas around innovation to support the young entrepreneurs around that to build their skills, because of course, Nigeria has 70% of its population with people under the ages of 30. So under the ages of 30 means it's quite a youthful demography. So again, if you're thinking of coming into the country and that demography is not in your calendar, it's not in your plan, then you might have to rethink, because 70% of your market is young people. These are the guys who consume content on social media. These are the guys who consume content on media content. So they serve as a bedrock for the country's growth. So if you're thinking of job creation, you're thinking of adding value, you need to mainstream your setup, your incorporation plans, to understand that you have more young people who are vibrant, who are the Gen Zs, and who are very active. And so any plan at all with respect to infrastructure that doesn't touch on that demography, it doesn't have a sustainability plan. Last but not the least, again, maybe I would just also mention that it's important to also leverage on the credibility of local stakeholders. One of the most important things when it comes to doing business in Nigeria, Nigeria runs not just on knowledge or expertise, that's one, which is major, and the country runs on social capital. In France, I mean, you don't need to know the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, to register your company. You don't need to know to get things done. But I must be sincere with you, knowing people in Nigeria is an asset. And you can't place, the value in social capital is quite important. So when people tell you we've worked with the likes of Dangote, we've been able to consult with Tony Elumelu, we've been able to work with Albert Igwe, who has launched a branch of Access Bank in Paris, a Nigerian bank, then you place premium value on that, because as much as France is a bureaucratic country, Nigeria is not as bureaucratic, but you could have time spent on unnecessary fundamentals without knowing the right people. And I'm not talking about corruption here. This has nothing to do with bribery. I'm only talking about the continent itself. It's socially inclined. It's about who you know. It's about what buttons these people that you know can press. And just a phone call, as easy as you going to the airport, and funny enough, about to miss your flight. I mean, this is funny, but a plane can be held hostage for you if you know the right person, and you don't have to miss your flight to Paris. So Lagos traffic it doesn't have mercy on anyone. You can be in Lagos traffic for 4 or 5 hours. But sometimes if you've been to Nigeria, for some of us who understand, or my Nigerian colleagues are laughing, you can be in the flight and you're wondering, it's time to leave. And you're wondering, and then all of a sudden you see somebody with a very big turban comes in, or a young person with a suit, and you wonder, he held the plane ransom. Now, this is just a contextual argument to let you know that to move things, you need credible people. And of course, within France, there are reputable organizations that makes the job easier. Bpifrance is one. Business France is one. You have the Chamber of Commerce in Nigeria, which is the Franco-Nigerian Chamber of Commerce, FNCCI. So all of these avenues and these organizations are also there to make the job easier for French and European companies to penetrate the market. I must tell you, whether you like it or not, no matter how good your proposals are, you go to the country, deals sometimes are signed in golf clubs, not in a 10 o'clock meeting in the morning at the office, because the country thrives on social cohesion. It's who we are. And if you're going to play in a market where you understand their culture, I think it was Peter Drucker who said, culture will eat strategy for breakfast. So you have culture, you have strategy. Culture dominates strategy anytime. So when you understand people's way of life and how they do things, the goal is not to try to change culture. It's try to align with culture and understand what are the pieces I need to put in place. And this is why I'm dropping institutions that are credible, that before you go into the country, they can help you do some due diligence. Sometimes, I was in Romania a while ago, and I was also speaking about doing business in Nigeria to the Eastern Bloc of Europe. And of course, what they mentioned to me was, you have a country where all they knew was the Nigerian prince, and people would send in, emails, and they don't know so much about Nigeria compared to many other mainland Europeans. And one of the things I had to tell them, or to correct that notion, is that minute fraction of people who send emails, who call themselves Nigerian prince, has nothing to do with reputable young people who are driving innovations. Today, Nigeria's tech ecosystem is the most formidable in Africa. When it comes to funding, when it comes to venture capital, equity, the country has loads of investment. About 23% of the equity funds that come into the country comes to Nigerian startups. Out of 7 unicorns in Africa, unicorns, companies who are worth $1 billion, you have about 3 to 4 as Nigerian startups. So again, the goal is not to tell you that there are no problems, but the goal is to let you know that the problems are there, but the solutions are also readily available. And it's just about the willingness to be able to take the gamble, make the necessary commitments, and not take the things you see on a surface level. And I think I'll stop here and see if Ramsey has more questions for me.
I don't have any questions so far. Well, I do have a number, but first I'm going to start to thank you for your presentation today and for all of this insightful talking. Everything is different between the paper and the field, as we were talking about it yesterday during a long conversation we had. And I think, is there any question in the room to get started? Do anybody wants to ask anything? If not, because I have like good talking points that I think are going to be rather important. How do you feel about the tech sector in Nigeria? You talked about startups, you talked about development, you talked about agribusiness, some tech, infrastructure, oil and gas, but let's say I'm a French company and I would like to develop my activity in Nigeria. What would be like the 5-step process to opening an office in Nigeria?
Yes, I have partners here, so you might want to meet some of them here. Joba is from Nigeria. He runs one of the leading incubators, Nest. Larry is also here, who is also in edutech. So when it comes to tech, Nigeria is the formidable country in Africa when it comes to tech, and there are players who have made that ecosystem strong and thick. And one of those active players are incubators and accelerators. And so if you're a tech player, maybe one of the things you want to do is to really find out who are the major, incubators, who are the major accelerators who can provide that soft landing. And this is outside, of course, the agencies already mentioned. So you have an idea. Of course, also understand that the fact that it's an European idea doesn't necessarily also mean that it will be accepted largely in Nigeria. And that's where you need also somebody who is able to work with you to adapt the case. I've seen many mismatch when it comes to also tech ideas. I've seen French companies who go to Nigeria and they fail largely because they didn't adapt, to the context of the market, and they had no local support. I've also seen Nigerian companies who leverage on the French tech tickets. The government has the French tech ticket for Nigerian companies or other companies across the world to come to France and be able to also start up their businesses. Most Nigerian companies that I've seen who came through that French tech ticket, unfortunately, it's sad that most of them, 99% of them that I know, are not in business anymore. And the reason is because they also had a bright idea back in Nigeria, and they assumed that was going to be relevant in a French ecosystem. And so there is a mismatch. And the mismatch I see is that people assume that they have a solution, but what they have done is to create another problem. So the first thing you want to do once you find out what you have and you assume that the market is ready is that you want to engage the major players. And again, I mentioned some are accelerators, some are incubators, and some are probably just venture funds. They are able to help you see what is missing within your test or your prototype. You don't want to set up a company. I have a company right now, a French company, who is setting up in Nigeria. And as I speak to you right now, it was an assumed solution that they had for the agro space. Back in Nigeria, they got into Nigeria, and now they found out the problem that they had imagined was not even a real problem. So as I speak to you today, they've readapted the solution, and they're not even playing in that space. So maybe another thing I want to mention is, once you go into the country, you also want to be flexible enough. You might go with a solution that says, I'll be making a model, with blockchain technology, and you find out that blockchain does not even have the infrastructure currently in the country. Artificial intelligence is so fine, but if you remove some major hubs, Abuja, Lagos, and you want this to be widely accepted, not all cities or states have that infrastructure. So maybe what you want to even start doing is, how do you want to also be part of that infrastructural development? And you want to get stakeholders from Europe to be part of that, because there's no point trying to make a solution for users that will not be able to use your platform. So again, the easiest way is to not work in isolation. And when I said not work, you don't want to work also with experts, because there are many experts abroad who tell you that they know Africa based on their affiliation with Africa. but they are also as ignorant as many Europeans who live in Europe. And so many of them come in the disguise of consultants in Africa. You want to ask for dividends of their expertise. How many companies have you helped established in Nigeria? And if there's an incubator, you also want to ask, what's your resume? What have you done for European companies? So you don't want to be too fascinated about a good pitch deck, a good proposal. What you really want to ask is, give me a test case or a case study of how you've helped somebody like me to be able to, and that's what we do at Friends of Nigeria. We can give you myriad of French organizations, European organizations that have reached out to us, and within the expertise that we have in-house, we've been able to help them set up, not just in Lagos, but across the country. And one of the things we also do is also with respect to state governments, because we understand both ecosystems. So we're able to look at what is missing, and we also understand what is happening back home. And with that, we can able to tell you even the opportunities that you don't see, and we can help you tilt your service or your products to really address the real issue. Because sometimes people assume that they're addressing an issue, but they're not really solving the problem. They're actually creating another problem.
Thank you for your answer. Any question, anyone? Okay, I have another question for you. Let's say tomorrow Bpifrance approve my insurance prospection. I'm getting to Nigeria. How long do you think my prospection should be? A week, 2 weeks, a month? How long do you think it would take me to get to know like some key actors in the ecosystem, and what channel should I use to access those people?
All right. Yeah, if you get a fund from Bpifrance and you're going to Nigeria, how long will it take depends on the kind of business you're trying to run. So for instance, you're trying to go into manufacturing. This goes beyond an accelerator or an incubator. You probably want to engage the likes of NEPSA. NEPSA is the government institute that has to do with free trade zones. So with their free trade zones across Nigeria, you can leverage on those havens to be able to have tax breaks or tax holidays. If it's something that has to do with agriculture, again, you want to understand what kind of, so again, the product, it's a case by case basis, right? So if it's an export commodity product, then you probably would need licenses. And some of those licenses can have some level of, because incorporating your company is one thing, having licenses from different bodies, which is where I did mention that you now need to leverage on social capital. Okay, so if there are delays in your licenses coming out, that's where you can rely on Bpifrance, rely on Business France, rely on the Chambers of Commerce, rely on actors like the Embassy here in France, rely on Friends of Nigeria. So there is no time limit. Registration right now is easy because now it's done online. Not as fast as some African countries, right? Some 24 hours. I went to Estonia, and they were telling me it's within minutes. So for us, it's online, but it still takes time. But I'm saying when it now comes to licenses, it could take longer, and that's where you don't want to go without having the backing of people. So depending on the kind of company you want to run, the timeline to set up varies. It could take you from 3 months, it could take you to 1 year. I can't imagine somebody trying to set up an edutech platform right now. All you need is technology. For that one, what you need is those who can drive mobilization, adopters for the platform. So that is about finding the right partners to convince these educational actors to be able to onboard your service. But if it has to do with manufacturing, if it has to do with renewable energy, I mean, before you even get a JV done, the contracts and all of that with the state government, getting the buy-in of the local community, you want to start harvesting shea butter, bring it to France for cosmetics. It's beyond the states, it's beyond the federal government, it's beyond Business France or Bpifrance now. Now you also need to speak the language of the local actors. Because what you don't want to do is to just come in as an investor that doesn't have in mind the local stakeholders who can claim ownership. And the way to ensure that your business is sustainable is to ensure that the local community where you have your hub feels a sense of ownership. And I was talking to some of my colleagues who are into the agro space. Some of them are doing their business as far as the northern eastern part of Nigeria, where there is the proclaimed terrorist attacks. But if you ask them, they'll tell you they've not experienced any. I come from Lagos, and of course, you have some farms out of the southwest who have, because of the terrorist attacks or some of the insecurity issues, have to safeguard their farms with soldiers, with police, and other local, security, offices. But for these colleagues of mine who are here, the reason, and I was asking them, how come you don't have the problem we have in the southwest? You guys are in the heat of the problem. The northern part is plagued with the Boko Haram issue. They don't have that. And the one thing they told me is the communities they own the livelihood. So before anything happens, when it comes to attacks, they inform the stakeholders to say somebody is coming, because they guide the farms jealously because their livelihood is at stake. So there's a difference between going with the mindset of I'm employing people and I'm creating jobs for them and taking revenue out of the country, compared to we are collaborating, a co-creation process. And that shift in mindset for foreign investors is very important. You don't want to come as just an investor, you want to come to Nigeria as a partner. And you have no idea how local stakeholders are as much relevant as the federal government guys who give the licenses. They give the licenses at the federal government, they give you the back end, they give you the policy frameworks. But when local stakeholders tell you this business is not working, the monarch, the community chiefs, when they decide to stand against your business, there's no way around it, because they own the land, they understand the framework. And so again, the goal here is that you understand the level of ownership and you're able to work with local parties and make them feel. How that will work, I don't know. It could also mean advocating a part of beyond CSR. I don't believe in corporate social responsibility. You make so much money and then millions of euros, and then you paint a school with 50,000 euros. That's not what I'm talking about. Not corporate social responsibility. I'm saying that local stakeholders have vested interest in your project. Once you get that right, then of course the project is sustainable because it's not going anywhere. And whoever comes against them, against you comes against them. So they work for you and they work with you.
Before to last question, very short. If I want to open my business tomorrow in Nigeria, do I need a Nigerian partner to open it? I know in some countries it's mandatory to have someone who's from the country to open a business. So let's say I want to open a business tomorrow. Do I need you as a partner?
Yeah, you need me as a partner, and I'll be happy to. As long as it's not human trafficking.
No.
Yes.
Come on.
So yeah, you don't need a Nigerian partner, and maybe I need to
50% or lower, higher, or just like to have some shares.
Your local partner necessarily doesn't have to be the highest shareholder, but you just need that person to have a good percentage. I think that's the same way it appears in France and in most other countries. And again, maybe also here, before you make somebody your local partner in Nigeria, be sure that they have more to offer than, I'm going back to the same social capital, that they have more to offer than just an asset. Oh, I have a land. You bring your money and then be able to export your maize or export cashew. Be sure that they have what is called social capital, because sometimes those land sometimes could be worthless to you at the end of the day. So when you come and you want to find a local partner, you need to have a due diligence done on that person, because your board or whoever is on your board or whoever is your local partner has a very strategic role to play in how credible and how sustainable your company is. So you want to make sure that this person brings more value on board beyond just a physical asset of, I have an office space for you, you don't have to pay, or have a land for you. Because most times what I hear people do in Europe is, especially in the agricultural sector, I can give you 5 acres. So you bring up and then they negotiate, but that's not enough for you to be able to be sustainable. You want to be sure that this person has more than just the asset.
Last question. How do you see the business landscape evolving in the coming years? Do you see more smaller company? Do you see only oligopoly, monopoly generally in the area? Or do you see it evolving as like a completely competitive market?
Yeah, I mean, the business is evolving. Even as a Nigerian myself, based in France, it's quite a dynamic country. So in the next few, well, maybe not few years, in the next 4 years, based on the gesture of the current administration, the new president and his team, of course, there's a lot, again, like I mentioned, that has to do beyond the traditional sector. So if you're into oil and gas, yes, it's good. Construction is good. But now there's so much conversation around non-traditional sectors. So even if you're coming into, the construction industry, what will be interesting to know is how innovation plays a major role in what you're trying to do. What they want to know is how you've been able to view environmental impacts and ensure sustainability in terms of your carbon emissions. So in all of this, you have to take note of technologies already changing dynamics of Nigeria. Many, with respect to, I think it was the World Economic Forum, made a report that for every 10% investments made in infrastructure and broadband in Africa, the GDP of the country rises by 1.4%. So for every 10%, the GDP. So again, that's an actual statistics that now has informed many government agencies to begin to leverage on technology. So if you're thinking of the country, you're not thinking of technology, you're not thinking of young people, you're not thinking of innovation, you're not talking of the new creative sector, renewable energy. I mean, emerging economies, emerging sectors. Then you don't have like you can't plan for 20 years because what you're planning for might not even be existing. And so the goal is to see that Nigeria right now is driven by a youthful demography who are very innovative. The country thrives right now on innovation. Everything right now is powered by tech. So we know fintech currently is leading with respect to funding and investment. But right now, there are loads of innovations coming around health tech, insurance tech, edutech. And many of our companies who came out from Nigeria will be here to engage you further. So again, you come into the country, the evolving of the new dynamics is showing that technology should play a major role and young people should be at the focus. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about job creation. If you cannot argue for the government and you cannot make a case for how many young people will be employed, with respect to the shortage that we have in unemployment, then you might not even have a case to work with the government. For every ministry, the target is how do we reduce youth unemployment? So it's not about, just having an office with 5-man team. But now with technology, I was part of an European Union engagement with Jobber. And one of the things that was spelled out by the EU was that Europe has a shortage of skills in the IT sector. And the EU funded a project through the IOM, the International Organization for Migration. And they found 2 countries in Africa who could solve that problem of shortage in talent in Europe. And 2 countries were picked, Senegal and Nigeria. And most of the skills that we have today, even in Nigeria, they don't even have to relocate. There are folks who are based back in the country and solving problems for European clients. So again, this is what the country has become, where somebody can be far away in Adamawa State, can be far away in Abuja, but solving your problem as an European company. And so there is a strong, educated, literate, and IT-savvy young people. This is rich. As a matter of fact, in today's parlance, we don't say our major resource is not oil and gas. The major resource that Nigeria has is the human capital. So if you understand that, you'll be able to pitch your tent and leverage on these skills to be able to advance the quest of your country, of your company.
I think we're in the last minute, and thank you for your presentation. I think it's very thorough and clear and really demonstrate the opportunity that lies in Nigeria. And if you need to talk about Nigeria, if you need to talk about doing business in Nigeria, please come see Abiodun and his team. There is a whole delegation of entrepreneurs, CEOs who are from Nigeria, who have business, who know the field, and who know everything there is to know on the land. Again, there is a huge difference between the paper and the field, and they have the field experience that many of us need to get when it comes to Nigeria or doing business in Africa, generally speaking. Thank you so much, Abiodun, for today. Thank you all for coming,
Thank you,
and have
Ramsey.
a great week today.